So what do we have today? What are we diving into?
Today, we're going deep into a novel by Connie Briscoe called Money Can't Buy Love. Now, before you think, wait, this isn't a book club, hear me out, because this book is like a cautionary tale, you know? It really gets you thinking about what happens when life throws you a curveball, like a huge pile of cash, and how you handle it.
Right, and it's not just a straightforward money is bad kind of story. It's much more nuanced than that.
Exactly. It really digs into human nature and the choices we make when things change drastically. And it does it in a really engaging way so you don't feel like you're being lectured.
So it's more about the psychology of sudden wealth, not just the financial aspect.
Precisely. So for this deep dive, we're going to explore the lessons embedded in this story, especially about self-worth and decision-making when things suddenly shift in your life. You ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Okay, so at the heart of Money Can't Buy Love is our main character, Lenora. She's a photographer, super talented, but she's feeling kind of stuck. Money's tight, love life is messy, and she's questioning, everything.
Sounds pretty relatable.
Oh, totally. I think many of us have been there at some point, right? Feeling like you're spinning your wheels, and then, boom, out of the blue, she comes into a significant amount of money. And isn't that like the ultimate fantasy? Like suddenly all your worries could just disappear.
Definitely. That sudden windfall, that's a dream a lot of people have. It's like winning the lottery, right? All your problems solved.
Right. And initially, Lenora does all the things you might imagine. She quits her job, starts living a more comfortable life. But here's where things get interesting, right? Almost immediately, you start seeing these little red flags.
Like what kinds of things?
Like she's making these impulsive decisions, putting trust in people maybe a little too quickly. It's like watching a friend about to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And you just want to grab him and say, wait, hold on a second. Let's think this through.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's like you can see the potential trouble brewing. It's like wanting to shake Lenora and say, sis, slow down, read the fine print.
Okay, so we have this feeling of impending doom, but what's interesting is that Lenora isn't portrayed as naive or foolish. She's actually smart and talented.
Right, she's not clueless.
But, and this is crucial, she's also battling some deep insecurities and questioning her past choices. So it's not just about being smart, it's about the emotional baggage we all carry and how it affects our decisions.
Absolutely, and that makes her so relatable. I mean, it's easy to judge from the outside, but when you see her motivations, that desire for something better, that feeling of finally deserving a break, her mistakes become understandable, even if they're still frustrating to watch.
So it's like her heart is leading the way, even if her head knows better.
Exactly. And this ties into a bigger theme in the novel, how our emotions, especially during major life changes, can drive our decisions. Who hasn't made choices based on what we hope will happen instead of what's actually best for us? We see this with Lenora over and over. She's making choices based on hope for a better future, hope for love, hope for security. And sometimes she overlooks some pretty obvious warning signs in the process.
So she's not thinking clearly. She's letting her desires cloud her judgment.
Exactly. And the thing is, this is something we all do, right? Like investing time in the wrong person, ignoring red flags, thinking we can control outcomes that are way bigger than us. It's so human. And seeing a character like Lenora, who's smart and capable, still fall prey to these very common human failings is weirdly comforting. It makes you feel a little less alone in your own less than perfect decisions.
And this brings us to the cautionary aspect of the novel, right? It's not simply about the dangers of having money. It's more about how sudden wealth can amplify our existing vulnerabilities instead of magically fixing them.
So if you have insecurities before the money, those insecurities might just find new and fancier ways to express themselves after the money comes.
That's a really interesting point. It's like the money acts as a magnifying glass on our internal issues.
Right. And the book really makes you ask, can money truly buy happiness or solve deeper personal problems? And through Lenora's experiences, it seems to answer with a pretty resounding no.
Which is something a lot of people struggle with, right? The idea that if I just had more money, everything would be better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you ever, thought about winning the lottery? Yeah. Like really winning big?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Who hasn't? Right.
But then do you ever, think about what happens after? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like all the things that could go wrong.
Right. Like, what if it's not all, yachts and mansions? What if it actually makes things harder? Especially with the people you're closest to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, there's that saying, money can't buy happiness, right?
Exactly. So today we're going deep, really deep, into how sudden wealth can mess things up, especially in relationships.
And it can, out people's true colors. You know what I mean?
Right. So Lenora, she's this photographer, right? Working hard, maybe not making a ton of money.
Probably just getting by, like a lot of us.
And then, bam, she wins the lottery.
Wow.
$5 million. It's like everything changes overnight.
It's the dream, right? Financial freedom, no more worries.
She quits her job, breaks up with her longtime boyfriend, Gerald, and she's living the high life, new house, designer, everything.
Oh, yeah, the whole 9 yards. But that's when things start to get, well, a little complicated.
Yeah, that's what we're going to untangle today. How this sudden wealth really impacted Lenora, how it changed her relationships, and I guess, like, who she was.
And we're going to be using those excerpts you shared to, break it all down.
Okay, so first things first, she wins all this money. It must felt incredible.
Oh, totally. You're on top of the world. Anything is possible.
But then I guess there's that temptation to, go a little crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she went all out, that big house, the clothes, the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's not always about just enjoying the money. It can be about, showing off a little bit.
Like proving something.
Exactly. Or maybe even trying to fill a void, like something's missing inside.
And money can't really fix that, can it?
Nope. Not really. So while Lenora's out there buying all this stuff, there's still this, deeper stuff going on,
Right, like with her relationship with this Gerald guy. They were together for a while before she won, but it doesn't sound like it was all that great.
No, not really. And the sources kind of suggest that they were together more out of, necessity than actual love.
So what was holding them together then?
Well, it seems like Lenora was giving Gerald a lot. She was always there for him, even though he wasn't always faithful.
Oh, wow. So she was putting up with a lot.
Yeah, and he probably felt kind of superior, like he had the upper hand because she was struggling financially.
That sounds pretty messed up. And she just stayed with him.
It happens more often than you'd think. She was loyal, maybe too loyal, and that just reinforced his control over her.
So it sounds like Gerald liked having power over her. And Lenora, well, she felt kind of stuck, right? Emotionally and financially.
Exactly. It was an unbalanced relationship for sure. And you have to wonder, why didn't she leave sooner?
Yeah, why didn't she? I mean, people don't stay in bad relationships for no reason.
You're right. It's complicated. But the sources suggest a few things. For one, she was trying to make it as a photographer, right?
Which can be tough, I bet. Not exactly a stable career, is it?
No, not really. So she depended on Gerald for money, at least to some extent, and leaving would mean losing that security.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's scary to think about being on your own, especially if you're worried about money.
Right, and on top of that, Gerald was probably manipulating her emotionally, too.
Like making her feel bad about herself.
Exactly. Like she wasn't good enough to be on her own, that she needed him. It's classic controlling behavior.
And over time, that can really wear a person down, can it?
Absolutely. It can make you start to believe those things about yourself. And then there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy.
The what?
The sunk cost fallacy. It's this idea that you keep investing in something, even if it's not working, because you've already put so much into it.
Oh, like you don't want to give up after all that effort.
Yeah, and for Lenora, that meant years with Gerald. Even if they weren't happy years, it's hard to just walk away from that.
Like you feel like you've wasted all that time.
Exactly. And then there's just the societal pressure, right? Like you're supposed to be in a long-term relationship, and being single can feel like, well, failure.
It's like you're not meeting expectations.
Right. And all of that, plus the fear of being alone and struggling financially, it's a lot to deal with.
So basically, she felt trapped.
Yeah, pretty much. But then, of course, everything changes when she wins the lottery.
Right. She's got all this money. She leaves Gerald, and then she meets Reggie. And at first, it seems like, okay, maybe this is it. Maybe this is her happy ending.
Right. The new love, the fresh start, the whole fairy tale.
But our sources kind of hint that, well, maybe Reggie wasn't all that he seemed. Like maybe he was interested in Lenora for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, that's a big theme that comes up. What are people's true motivations? Especially when there's a lot of money involved.
So what do you think? Was Reggie genuinely into Lenora, or was he more into her, bank account?
It's hard to say for sure, but think about it. He shows up right after she wins the lottery. That's a pretty big red flag.
Like he just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, right. It's more likely that he was drawn to her newfound wealth and the status that comes with it. Suddenly, he's got access to a whole different world.
So it's not really about Lenora, it's about what she can provide.
Exactly. And Lenora, Well, she's new to all this wealth, right? She's probably a little naive about how people might try to take advantage.
So she's more vulnerable.
Definitely. And what about Lenora? What was she getting out of this relationship with Reggie?
Yeah, why did she fall for him so quickly?
Well, for one, he was giving her the attention that she wasn't getting from Gerald. You know, the compliments, the charm, the whole romantic package.
So the opposite of Gerald, the controlling jerk.
Right. And after all that, she probably just wanted to believe that she'd finally found someone good.
Like, the money had solved all her problems, including her love life.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that fantasy, but deep down, she probably still had those insecurities, those needs that weren't being met.
So she was setting herself up for disappointment.
Pretty much. And the sources point out all these warning signs that she should have seen.
Like what? Tell me more about these warning signs.
Well, the first one we already talked about, right? He shows up out of nowhere right after she wins the lottery.
Yeah, that's shady.
And then there's how quickly the relationship moves. It's like instant love, whirlwind romance, the whole thing. That's actually a tactic called love bombing.
Love bombing, what's that?
It's when someone tries to overwhelm you with affection and attention really early on. Like they're showering you with gifts, saying all the right things, making you feel like you're the only person in the world.
So it's like they're trying to sweep you off your feet before you even have time to think.
Exactly. It's a way to create a really intense bond so they can gain your trust and control you.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a huge red flag if someone's acting like they're head over heels in love after knowing you for, like, a week.
So what other warning signs were there with Reggie?
Well, for one, he didn't seem to have his own money figured out. He had expensive tastes, but no real job or anything.
So he was basically relying on Lenora's money.
Pretty much. And instead of encouraging her to be responsible with her winnings, he actually seemed to encourage her to spend more.
Like he was pushing her to buy things.
Yeah, which is definitely not what a caring partner would do. If he really cared about her, he'd want her to be financially secure in the long run.
So he was just trying to benefit from her wealth.
Exactly. And then it gets even worse. He starts to take control of her finances little by little.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's classic financial abuse. He wants to be the one managing her money, making the decisions.
It's like he's taking away her power.
Exactly. And all the while, his own intentions are super vague. He's got no real goals, no plans for the future, except for maybe spending Lenora's money.
He sounds like a real piece of work.
Yeah, and on top of that, there are all these signs that he's not being honest with her. Things don't add up in his stories, but Lenora's so caught up in this fantasy that she ignores them.
She doesn't want to see the truth.
Right. And whenever she does try to question him, he gets all manipulative and turns it around on her.
So he's gaslighting her.
Yeah, basically. He's trying to make her doubt her own perceptions and keep her under his control.
So it's like this whole pattern, right? First the love bombing, then the financial abuse, and then the emotional manipulation.
Exactly. And the sources make this really interesting connection between love bombing and financial abuse.
What do they say?
Well, they say that love bombing is like the setup for financial abuse. It's like creating this intense emotional bond so that when the abuser starts taking control of your money, you're more likely to go along with it.
Because you're already so attached to them and you don't want to lose them.
Exactly. And you're more likely to excuse their behavior because you're so blinded by this, like, fake love.
Wow, that's really insightful. It's like they're grooming you for abuse.
Pretty much. And Reggie's actions are like the textbook example of this. He starts with the charm, the affection, and then it slowly turns into manipulation and control.
So it's a reminder to be careful who you trust, especially when there's a lot of money involved.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about Lenora's journey with wealth and how it affected her confidence. You know, the sources suggest that winning all that money actually gave her the courage to leave Gerald in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. It probably gave her a sense of power, like she could finally stand on her own 2 feet.
Exactly. For the first time, she had the resources to create the life she wanted without depending on anyone. And that's huge for someone who's been in a controlling relationship.
It's like she finally had a way out.
Right. But as you said earlier, money can't fix everything.
No, it can't. So even though she had all this money and this newfound confidence, she still ended up in another bad relationship with Reggie.
Yeah, and that's because the money didn't address the deeper issues, you know, the insecurities, the patterns that led her to Gerald in the first place.
So she was still vulnerable, even with all that wealth.
Exactly. It's like putting a bandage on a wound without actually cleaning it out. It might look better on the surface, but the infection's still there.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of not addressing deeper issues, what about Lenora's photography? She was so passionate about it before, but after winning the lottery, it seems like she just gave it up.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You'd think she'd have more time and freedom to pursue her art. now that she doesn't have to worry about money.
Right. But instead, she just kind of falls into this lifestyle of luxury and spending.
It's like she equated financial success with happiness and forgot about the things that truly gave her meaning.
So she lost sight of her passion.
It happens. And it's a reminder that money can't buy fulfillment. You have to find that from within yourself.
And sometimes that means pursuing your passions, even if they don't make you a lot of money.
Absolutely. Now, going back to what we were talking about earlier about Lenora feeling trapped with Gerald, the sources make this really important connection to women who stay in bad relationships because of financial dependence.
Oh, yeah, we were going to talk about that. It's a huge issue, isn't it?
It is. And Lenora's story, even though she eventually gets out, it really highlights how real that struggle is for so many women.
They might be unhappy, even abused, but they can't leave because they don't have the financial means to support themselves.
Exactly. They might be afraid of becoming homeless or not being able to provide for their kids. It's a terrifying situation to be in.
And you can feel like there's no way out.
Right. So while Lenora's situation was temporary, it shows just how powerful financial independence can be.
It can literally be the difference between staying in a bad situation and being able to create a better life for yourself.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that we need to support women who are facing these challenges, provide resources, create opportunities, and help them build that financial security.
Absolutely. What are the big takeaways from Lenora's story and everything we've talked about?
Well, first of all, sudden wealth can really shake things up in our relationships. It can bring out the best in people, but it can also bring out the worst.
Yeah, it's like a test of character, almost.
Exactly. And second, money doesn't solve everything. It might change your circumstances, but it doesn't change who you are on the inside.
Right. Those deeper issues, the insecurities, the patterns, they're still there, regardless of how much money you have.
Exactly. And finally, Lenora's story is a cautionary tale about prioritizing the wrong things. Chasing money or the illusion of love instead of focusing on genuine connection, self-awareness, and pursuing your passions.
It's like she lost herself in all the glitter and gold.
Yeah, kind of. So I think the big question for all of us is, how do we navigate these big life changes, whether it's sudden wealth or something else, without losing sight of what truly matters?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with.
Yeah.
What are the things that make for a truly fulfilling life, beyond the money and the material possessions?
It's about finding that balance, and
Right.
building those strong foundations, the emotional intelligence, the healthy relationships, the sense of purpose.
That's something we can all work on, regardless of our financial situation. But what's so compelling about this novel is how Connie Briscoe makes this point in such a captivating way, highlights her skill in pulling us into Lenora's world, making us root for her, even when we see the potential pitfalls ahead. Her writing is just magnetic.
So we're invested in her story, even when we want to yell at her for making bad decisions.
Exactly. The pacing of the story helps too. It moves quickly, and you're constantly wondering what's going to happen next. It's that gripping quality that makes the lessons hit home even harder. You're not being preached at. You're experiencing Lenora's journey with her.
And because she's so relatable, her mistakes become even more impactful for the reader.
For sure. You can see yourself or someone you know making those same choices, driven by the same desires and vulnerabilities. And that brings us to another important point. The book really makes you think about what you would do in Lenora's shoes.
It's like a self-reflection exercise.
Totally. It forces you to consider your own blind spots, the things you might overlook if you were caught up in the excitement of a seemingly golden opportunity.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the difference between what you want and what you actually need to be truly happy and fulfilled. So, zooming out a bit, Money Can't Buy Love is more than just a fun read. It's a really insightful exploration of human nature, how we deal with big changes, and how our emotions influence our choices. It highlights the complexity of self-worth and how sometimes external changes aren't enough to fix what's going on inside.
It reminds us that sometimes those things that seem like amazing opportunities might come with their own set of challenges.
Right, and that self-awareness is crucial. Knowing your own motivations and potential weaknesses is so important, especially when faced with something that seems like a clear win. Because true contentment and security, well, they come from a much deeper place than just a change in your bank account.
So it's about looking beyond the surface, understanding the fine print of those golden opportunities.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message to take away. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Lenora's story. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's been really insightful.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the power of stories to teach us about ourselves, even when they're fictional. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, And remember, sometimes the most valuable lessons come disguised as captivating stories.
I like that. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.